Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, September 28th edition of the Dudley Board of Selectmen, Highway Commissioners, Cemetery Commissioners meeting. Before we begin, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 20, and the Governor's executive orders imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, although a quorum of the members of the Dudley Board of Selectmen will be physically present for this meeting, no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. The meeting will be live broadcast on Dudley Cable Access Television Channel 192, and members of the public can also access the rebroadcast of the meeting online by YouTube. In the event of an unanticipated interruption in this broadcast, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Members of the public who wish to appear before the Board of Selectmen must make an appointment to appear on an upcoming agenda by contacting Michelle Jervis at selectmen@dudleyma.gov or by calling Michelle at 508-949-8001. Placement on the agenda is not guaranteed, however, and persons requesting to appear before the Board of Selectmen should not attend the meeting in person unless and until the appointment has been confirmed by the Board of Selectmen. Persons with matters appearing on a meeting agenda may request that they attend by virtual means, such as conference call, rather than in-person attendance. Such a request should be directed to Michelle Jervis at selectmen@dudleyma.gov or by calling Michelle at 508-949-8001 no more than 3 business days in advance so that appropriate arrangements can be made. However, persons or representatives with matters appearing on the meeting notice/agenda who wish to be physically present at the meeting must observe the following requirements. In accordance with the existing requirements imposed by the Governor, meeting rooms will be limited in terms of the total number of persons that may be physically present at the same time, including board/committee members and staff. Satellite rooms will be available for overflow, and the meeting will be broadcast in real time in those satellite rooms. Persons who wish to participate in any particular matter on the meeting agenda will be asked to wait in a satellite room until that agenda item is reached, at which point attendees will be rotated between the main meeting room and the satellite rooms as appropriate. Social distancing must be maintained in both the main meeting room and its satellite rooms. Face masks or coverings will be required in accordance with Governor Baker's May 1st, 2020 COVID-19 Order number 31, order requiring face coverings in public places where social distancing is not possible. A copy of that order can be found at https://www.mass.gov. May 1, 2020 Masks and Face Coverings download. Failure to comply with these requirements may lead to an attendee's removal from the meeting. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Sullivan. Oh.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, right. I'd like to make a motion that we allow Mr. Joseph to participate remotely.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote.
Tom Marcy, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Carrie Siganovich, aye. Unanimous. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
before we start the agenda, I can ask for a moment of silence to recognize the over 9,400 deaths from COVID-19 and the over 131,000 total cases in the state of Massachusetts.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda as is.
Second, assuming, oh yeah, something up release. Yep, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Tom Marcy, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Carrie Siganovich, aye. Unanimous. Next on the agenda, we have the town administrator's report. Mr. Ruda?
A little clogging issue here, Mr. Chairman.
I get that.
Board members, good evening. The majority of my time last week has been preparing for the technical requirements for the public hearing before the planning board, which is scheduled for this Wednesday, September 30th at 7 p.m. This public hearing will be a hybrid model, meaning that as our capacity allows, those wishing to attend will be asked to notify Michelle Jervis in advance to ensure that we have the ability to accommodate the social distancing requirements that are needed to be followed. The option to attend virtually via Zoom meeting also exists by contacting Michelle Jervis, who will take the caller's information, including an email address, and will provide the Zoom meeting invitation and passcode prior to 5 p.m. on the night of the hearing. So in any event, the number to contact Michelle is 508-949-8001, or you can contact her by emailing Selectmen, that's MEN, at dudleyma.gov, selectmen@dudleyma.gov. And so simultaneously and over the course of the past 2 weeks, we've been working with our partners at Nichols College and with our town clerk and our public safety chiefs and our own legal counsel and counsel for Camden Properties to produce an informational video that discusses the project and the amendment. Upon the conclusion of the public hearing on this Wednesday, we anticipate that the video in the final edit will be completed by October 5th, leaving 2 weeks until the town meeting on October 19th for us to run that informational video. And that's going to be placed, Mr. Chairman, on the website, on social media, on cable access, all the usual suspects. We'll probably even run it in the lobby of the town hall.
Great.
Excellent.
The Board of Selectmen and FAA, and by the way, Mr. Chairman, this has been posted as a joint meeting, so that the Selectmen are encouraged to attend on Wednesday for the public hearing for the zoning bylaw amendment.
Teacher says.
The Board of Selectmen and FAA will hold a joint meeting on October 6th to review the fall special town meeting supplemental budget, which I have prioritized as we have discussed in prior meetings, and that is public safety and health, including highway, as the top priorities. My strategy has not changed from the one that the board accepted and has been authorizing since March, that is to fund operations and priority obligations and hold funds in reserve through the end of the fiscal year. And I have to say that department heads have been very cooperative throughout the process. The draft warrant that I am submitting tonight is just that, a draft that may include additional articles or removal of draft in some additional articles or removal of some draft articles prior to the time that we vote to close and post on Friday. But tonight you will notice that there is a single capital expenditure request being requested as an article that is a pickup truck that has been previously approved by the Capital Improvement Committee, and I have not recommended that it be removed from the warrant because it's, as I have in the case of other requests, as the source of funding is from the water, sewer, and retained earnings versus the town general fund. We anticipate that a chunk of free cash will be deposited into our stabilization funds in October and be made available to town meeting should they be needed for an unforeseen circumstance throughout the end of the fiscal year. All of that said, and before we get into the warrant, there are some capital expenditures that we have put on hold, and I recognize that we'll need to put on for the spring because there's going to be a longer turnaround time for some of them. But like I said, department heads have been very cooperative, and throughout this, for the last 7 months, everybody's been very cooperative and willing to make the budget work in these unprecedented times. So that's it for my report.
Thank you, Mr. Ruda. Board members, any questions? Mr.
Yeah,
Marson?
just a quick comment, Jonathan. I know that preparing that Stevens Mill informational video is a lot of work. I appreciate it. I know you took to heart the communication and find better ways to get people, engaged in understanding what we're trying to do as a town. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you. Everybody's contributed a lot to that.
Good, Mr. Sullivan?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Report.
Motion and a second. Mr. Joseph, do you have anything? Yes.
Yeah, before we take a new motion, could I ask for the board's indulgence? And on our previous vote, which was to approve the election workers, I voted aye.
Yes.
And because my wife is on that list, I would like to vote as abstain rather than aye.
Can we do that, Michelle?
Bring it up for reconsideration.
Mr. Joseph, would you like to bring that up for reconsideration, just so we can correct the record?
Yeah, I can do that because I voted in the prevailing majority.
Okay.
So you, before you take another motion, I would ask that we reconsider the vote regarding election workers.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Michelle, what's going on? Is that for the bylaw later?
I'm sorry?
Is that for the bylaw? Okay, just want to make sure we have enough.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, no worries. Motion and a second, no further discussion. Roll call vote?
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Tom Marcy, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Gary Siganovich, aye, unanimous.
Now the motion.
So Michelle, on that, we're going to have all voting.
Now we gotta do
We're going to
another.
revote it.
now we
On the
gotta do-
entire
Oh, we have to
consent
revote it
agenda?
as well?
Mr.
What
Chair,
is-
make a motion to
Yes.
accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second, roll call vote?
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Tom Marcy, aye.
Paul Joseph, abstain.
Gary Siganovich, aye. So we have 4 yea,
Roll call
1
vote?
abstain.
Roll call vote, though?
401.
401, yep.
4-0, okay.
Thank you for that.
Certainly, Mr. Joseph. On to new business. Up next is Superintendent Stephen LaMarche, introduction and back-to-school update. Mr. LaMarche? Good to see you again, sir, whichever you're more comfortable with. There or sit.
Either
call.
one works.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, listen, I asked Mr. LaMarche, and Mr. LaMarche and I have been essentially thrown together since we both started at about the same time, and been working very closely together to, to get through the pandemic. The schools have been very cooperative, and we've tried to reciprocate, and I thought it was time that, as soon as we reopened, that we made an official introduction to our new school superintendent, got an update over the reopening plan and so forth, so.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. LaMarche. How are you?
Good, how are you? And
Good, thank you.
I want to start off by, you certainly as a community have given me a test of how to pronounce all the names within the community. So Chairman Siganovich.
Very good, thank you.
Tried pretty well with that. Town Administrator Reuter, we've definitely been working extremely well together. Michelle's been working well too, as well. Chief Wayner, we've really enjoyed working. And Chief K, but I'm going to say Kokonowski. Did I say? Kokonowski? Kochanowski. Sorry about that. I was close. Can't bat 1,000 every time, So, but I want to introduce myself. I apologize for not being in here earlier last year, but I was definitely being new to the community, not being somebody who came up through the ranks within the Dudley Charlton School District. I was certainly drinking from a fire hose as soon as I got here. Again, I apologize for not getting it sooner, and then once March hit, that's when everything hit the fan, and we kind of have been rolling since then. I did notice many of you at the town meeting this past June, which I thought was very successful, given the nature of town meeting, and it was my first exposure to Dudley's town meeting process. I really, myself personally, I have not experienced the clickers. In the 9 years as a superintendent, I thought that was a brilliant move, and I thought that it really built in a lot of efficiency. I am going to say I'm a little biased towards the town moderator. I think he's a great guy, Mr. Starczewski, or Principal Starczewski from my perspective, but that went well. We are doing everything we can to reopen. It has been quite the process. The state has basically given us loads of guidelines and documents, but basically their message was plan for everything. And then we'll see, let your local community decide what direction you want to go in, but plan for everything. We wish we could plan for everything as being top-notch and funded completely, but we know that we have to be respectful of the communities that we're in, and we have to approach it from a conservative perspective. It wasn't planned for everything and ask for everything. That was not what the guidance was that we received. It was planned for everything with what you have, and if there is some additional needs, work with your communities, or, hopefully at some point in time there'll be an additional funding source, whether it's federal government or something of that nature. As you know, that has not come forward. We were level funded as a district, as everybody else was, received level funded dollars. We did have some COVID relief, which helped bring us closer to a level service budget. But a level service budget wasn't going to do it all, because we also had to increase our spending in other areas to address the COVID changes. So therefore, inevitably, there were some reductions or unfilled positions to make this work at this current time. You may have heard we've gone through an HVAC assessment for our communities. I sent out a blast email to all staff as well as to all parents. Believe it or not, we're coming down to some adjustments that need to be made in all buildings. We expected that. We expected there was going to be a recognition that we needed to put in the right filters in the right spots. We're working with anywhere from MERV 7 to MERV 13. MERV 13 is obviously the best filter to put in, and all of our larger air handling units will be able to accommodate that MERV 13. But some of our smaller univents and some of our older facilities will require a less MERV type filter to work. It doesn't mean that it's not doing its job, but if you put a MERV 13 in there, then you're taxing the air ventilator, and it's not going to work appropriately at all. From that report, we have learned that one of the schools was not designed appropriately for COVID-19 world, and that happens to be the Heritage School over in Charlton. And we're running into some issues and dilemmas there that we need to work on. The good news, though, is all of our classroom environments, if we open a window, we've reached the standard required for ventilation, outside air ventilation, because of the window being open. It means that we will have, obviously, an increase in our utility costs at this time, but we're working on the remedies for that school at the same time as well. All of the schools in Dudley fell into that category of there needs to be adjustments, there needs to be an evaluation of some dampers, whether they're opening or operating correctly, but they all fell within a very positive category from our perspective after doing the HVAC assessment. There's something to be said about having single univents, which is how most of our schools were built, with the exception of Heritage. It has a plenum ventilation system through the hallway, so it has rooftop air handling units that bring it into the hallway and spread it out through the classrooms. Having the single univents in the classrooms brings in that fresh outside air, and that's the stuff that we're continuing to try to, again, make sure that they're working appropriately. I have to say, out of all the districts I've worked in, this would make number, I'm not going to name them all, but this would make number 5. We have bar none, the best custodians in any district that I've ever worked in. I don't know why that is. If I was to guess or venture a guess at this point in time, it's pride in community. It's pride in our school system, and I really appreciate it, because they go above and beyond. They're not only custodians, they're maintenance workers as well, and they do a ton of maintenance for our facilities, and they keep them up to speed. They keep them in good condition, and they've addressed all of the concerns that somebody would have typically had, below an HVAC assessment, total assessment of our systems. But they do a phenomenal job for our district and for our communities, and you should be very proud of the work that they do as well on the schools and facilities that we have. It really helps us in so many ways. So we are entering into hybrid this week. Our goal all along was on Thursday of this week to start with our pre-K through 4, grade 4. Right now it's half days. I know that half days, the struggle sometimes with presenting the report and how we're re-entering is what are the intricacies of that, because if you just take the half day alone, it makes it look like we're not doing enough. I get that feeling. I get that understanding. But the half days, what it really lent itself to, number one, is we didn't explode our budget by having to hire a whole bunch of 16 new teachers to make a full day hybrid work. But the other part of that too is we're guaranteed that a classroom teacher will meet with their student, whether you're in remote that day or hybrid that day, every single day, with the exception of Wednesday right now, to get into hybrid. So even if you're in for a half day, you still have to go home and re-engage with your classroom teacher that day. If you want remote learning, you're engaging with your unified arts in the morning, and then you're engaging with your classroom teacher that afternoon. With our high school, another great example is we're running through a 6-period schedule in our high school. My son, who's in another community, he's only doing 4 periods a day. We wanted to really build a schedule and build a program that if we could go either way, if we had to go to full remote, we're still giving a comprehensive program, but if we went to full in person, we would have very little change in what that would look like to make sure that all the connections, relationships between students and teachers was happening. So again, if you look at it from one angle, I get the feeling, I get the understanding. And then the one thing we did one of the half days too is we avoided what we would consider the biggest liability, and that's serving lunch in the school, where students are permitted to take off their mask for 20 minutes. So if you had some type of an outbreak or something of that nature, it would get very complicated. We believe this plan adds longevity to us staying open and getting to that full in person, which is really where we want to go. So we're very excited that we start this Thursday with students in our schools, pre-K through 4. You know, there's always going to be bumps. Anytime you try to do something like transportation now, where you can only have 22 students on a bus, there's going to be some bumps and, you know, bumps on the road, pun intended, but there's going to be some places where, something maybe went wrong for one particular student or not, but we'll address each and every one of those. And I have to say, one of the things that's been probably most difficult, because I really pride myself in answering emails within a 24 to 48 hour period, is the number of emails that have been receiving since August, and trying to get to those and get through those. We will answer every one of them. We will continue to work on those. Communication is really critical during this entire time here. So I hope that Dudley Charlton continues to make, Dudley Charlton Regional School District continues to make you as town leaders proud. But again, as Town Administrator Ruda said, we really appreciate working with the town and the town departments to try to make all this work, because it has not been without complication, and it hasn't been easy, and it's really uncharted. This is not. When you go to school to be a superintendent, if there is such a thing, you never think about working through a pandemic. So this has been very complicated, but I've got a great team around me and great people to work with, and I still am enjoying my job as a superintendent for the Dudley Charlton Public Schools.
That's great that you're still enjoying your job. Thank
Yep,
you.
I am.
Board members, Mr. Sullivan.
Superintendent Lamas, nice to see you again. I originally met you right after you got appointed. We had a district-wide two-town finance meeting at Shepherd Hill. You were at it.
Correct,
when,
yes.
The interim superintendent was still there, but it was a transition. It's
Yep.
nice to see you. So I have a question on something you just said about utility costs maybe increasing if the windows are open. Was there any savings, and if there was, from being shut down March through the end of the school year? Did that money roll back to the towns, or did that just stay in Dudley Charlton's budget?
That stayed in, if any savings, which was on a $50 million budget, I would consider that minimal savings, but there was savings through transportation because we didn't transport students. That stayed within a transportation revolving account. But to help balance the budget, as you know, we reduced the assessment coming into the fiscal year from the original assessment that we were working with. To reduce that, we used that money to help offset that assessment to get to a level service, continue with a level service budget for this fiscal year. It would be really easy for me to say, Selectmen, to say that any savings we have will go directly to utilities. We're trying to capture savings everywhere in our budget. The one thing that we're not trying to do is go out and spend as much money as possible to make this operation run. So any captured savings will go towards, and we've been trying to. Projection is really hard. You're projecting into a fog. You're projecting into a ghost. You're projecting, however you want to say it, with the state having a 3-month budget, telling us we're level funded, but not knowing if there's any other resources. But trying to project, we are going to capture as much savings as possible so that we don't come back to the towns for any adjustments or any additional funds beyond any COVID relief money that we have. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I have one other question. I'm not sure if you can answer it, and it's more of a people in the community. I know I've talked to several other Board of Selectmen members, and like I said, maybe you can't even answer it. There was an issue with social media towards the end of the summer concerning members of the staff, and people want to know what happened, what's the solution, was there any, for the want of a better term, penalties for things that were posted that may have either been deemed inappropriate, were they violations of social media policies? And that's like a community question. I know, like I say, other selectmen have people reaching out, so I don't know if you can even answer that, but I'm just wondering on behalf of the townspeople.
Yes, Mr. Selectman, as you know, it's a personnel matter, so I can't get into the details of that. But it certainly was addressed. It was a violation of our school committee policy. IJNDA, I think it was, third or fourth paragraph within that particular policy. It was a clear violation of that policy, so it was addressed by school administration. It was taken very seriously. The comments are ingrained in my head. I don't want to repeat them at this point in time. But you know, to say something similar to your babies, my babies over your babies, is certainly inappropriate and actually appalling and disgusting as an educator. We are committed. We are what you are considered a local parentis. We're considered the parent during the day. So we have responsibility of being a parent during the school day because parents aren't in the school, and we take that responsibility very seriously. It was absolutely addressed, and if it occurs again, it will be addressed again, but my goal always in addressing those types of matters is they don't occur again. So I appreciate the question, and I hope the community gets a strong sense that it was intolerable.
So, one more, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Certainly, Mr. Sullivan.
I hate to put you on the spot, but this is why you get the big hat. Parents that are in the Dudley Charlton Regional School District can know with 100% absolute certainty that everyone, if there was ever a problem, and it's mind-numbing that we even have to have this discussion, every person on staff is trained to handle it and react appropriately, and your pledge is that everybody will handle it appropriately.
Yeah, it was without short notice that a message from me to the entire staff went out regarding, as a result of that situation, identifying the school committee policy on that. What I can't guarantee to you, Mr. Selectman, is that I can predict human behavior and what people will actually do. But the expectation is perfectly clear.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Anything, Mr. Marson?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, it's great that, I think I was at that meeting with Sally, so good to see you again. I know it's
That
been a while.
was an interesting meeting, yep.
Yep, you know, we usually have a pretty close relationship with the superintendent, as we did with Mr. Desto, and as we work together to solve the problems that we all face. And I also want to just start off by saying I really appreciate all that you and the school committee has done. We have to sit here and make decisions too, and I can't imagine, it's not lost on me, the enormity of the stuff you guys have to work on. To Mr. Sullivan's point, then that's the number one thing I heard as well, right? I mean, that was...
Agreed.
And, you know, especially if you know some people so put that aside, I commend you for addressing that head on, even here in public. The other thing, and again, should say, parent of 2 kids in the system. My son Anthony's a senior this year, and my daughter Jessica is a special needs student at Charlton Middle. And I also want to say that she's part of cohort D, so Jessica's been in school for a couple of weeks. You'll know her when you see her.
Okay.
And she's loving it. The van comes every day. No problems yet. So I think, you know, it should give everybody a sense of it's working. Kids are at school. They're with the teachers. They did it over the summer. It's not like it hasn't been open at all. I know it's a limited number of kids, but it is working there. So also thank you for talking about how we're going to push to get in person for everybody, right? Because I think you know this, the kids need it.
Correct.
That's the second thing that I heard. Well, now it's the most important, obviously, is some kids just don't do well. And a couple other questions that I've been asked. This was a good forum as any to ask them.
Sure,
But
absolutely.
one that came up a couple times was when we close down, like, you know, you have the actually my son falls into this bucket too. I mean, he and I haven't discussed this, but it's one of those, they're applying to schools now, colleges, and all the grades that were from term 3 and 4, I think I'm getting this right, weren't included in class rank, GPA, and all that. So I heard a lot of, I'm going to write a letter, and I suggested everybody do that. You probably have a lot in your email, but
Yeah.
anything we can share with the parents at home about how the school came to that decision, and how do other communities handle that, and how will that affect, you know, because it's competitive, right?
Without question, and it's a great question. And last year, we were all in certain categories. And there were some districts who didn't even count term 3 within their GPA and all that kind of stuff as well. We counted term 3 within their GPA for the school year. One of the things we've learned, though, through all of our research is the higher ed institutes were far more flexible than we were around understanding that there was going to be a shift in grading and GPAs and class rank and all of those things at the end of March of last year. So that was one piece of good news, that they were going to add in their own formula or some type of formula to address, because every community was different. Every community was doing a number of things around all of that. So the higher ed, now that doesn't ease the parent or the child who's in high school, because you are doing everything you can to take that next step.
Sure.
You want to get into the best school. You want to be in the program that you want to be in. So the drive is there. But again, what we were learning is higher ed institutes were already factoring some type of formula in their process, so they weren't doing it as if it was a normal year of transition for students with their GPAs. And the same thing will happen now that you said your son's a senior now, so the junior year will be factored in some way, but the senior year, now we're on track for GPA and for all of that, with all of our grades
It
going
can be
forward this year.
submitted or something, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it came up more in the beginning, but I knew, once I heard you were coming in, I'm trying to think of all the things that people asked, so.
But from my perspective, this is where the state fell down, if I can be brutally honest
No,
with
no,
you. The
we are.
state should have come up with a format and a system
Yeah.
for all of us to buy into. Again, this whole summer thing of plan for everything and then let your community decide, you're just pinning each other against each other. You know, this community's better, they have this, your community's better because you do that, and we're just all over the place. We truly wish there was more direction and more of a standard to a lot of this application. It's ironic that, there is this message that, we're leaders in the country when it comes to getting back into public education, but for those of us in the trenches, we feel like we're just still muddling through all of these levels of guidance and what's best, and we're really become personal interest industries. We've really become what choices, everybody has choices, and we're really trying to filter through all of those, and that makes our business very difficult.
No, I understand. I mean, I'm a very huge fan of the public school system, so you have a supporter in me, but I know it's hard, but the one last thing is, I hear a lot, and it's hard to argue this one, the case numbers in Dudley and Charlton. I mean, what are we at now? 0?
4.
Huh?
We're at 4 right now.
We're at 4, okay. We were at 0 for a long time during the summer, and, people like to, make fun of the governor. He said, he had Desi say to the people who were full remote, I need your plan on my desk within 10 days, and how you guys are gonna get to hybrid or whatever.
Yep.
Like, are they gonna, what if, say the case loads, which we hope, stay low, are they gonna do something similar to, what's the plan to kind of flip the switch to activate path A in person versus B remote?
Yep, if I could make 2 points based off of that,
Please.
Selectman, because I appreciate the question. The data is really on our side within our two communities, even if you look at both communities in a big perspective. I think what we're not going to be able to escape is somebody who has a connection to COVID-19, whether it was a relative or a family, and we have protocols in place that we've been working with both boards of health to try to put those in place because it will be what I call the 7, what was it, the 6 degrees of separation. There'll be 7 degrees of separation for COVID-19 in some way. We have to be able to process all of that because our way of handling that will only add to the level of trust in the acceptance of some level of exposure to COVID. I'm not asking for that. I'm not looking for it. But we truly need to do that. There will be some degrees of that, and we've already felt some of those degrees of that. So communication is still a #1 priority for us on that. So hopefully that data continues to work in our favor. We know our pathway already to full in-person. Our pathway to full in-person is alleviation of 6 feet. If the CDC continues with 6 feet, and that's the standard, and the state doesn't push 3 feet, now the state suggested 3 feet, but the state didn't push 3 feet. They didn't give us the bullets in our gun to say, yep, we're going 3 feet. They said, we suggest 3 feet, but it's a local decision. So unless there's alleviation from the 6
Funny
feet,
how that works.
we're not gonna get into full in-person. If there's an alleviation of 6 feet, we're there like that. We truly are.
Good.
We got the plan in place and we're ready to go, and there'll be very few disruptions. Now, keep in mind the 6 feet is also on buses too. Because if they still remain the 22 students per bus, to get the full in-person, we'd have to double our fleet. And we don't have the millions of dollars to double the fleet of buses to do that.
No,
We don't.
no.
So, Selectman Marcy, I really appreciate
You
the-
did. I mean, I know they're kind of specific, but it's these are the ones I've heard.
Yeah.
I knew you would come in and answer them, and I hope for people listening at home, they're hearing this. It's not a school committee meeting where it's just this. This is more of a broader. We're looking at it from everybody in town. And everybody wants to know. So I truly appreciate.
I appreciate the opportunity as well to answer all of your questions.
So thank you for all you do, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Marcy.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Joseph.
Superintendent Lamont, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here to introduce yourself to the board. I regret that you and I will not meet face to face tonight, but I hope and pray the Lord that we'll be able to do that pretty soon. I'd like to follow up on Stephen's line of questioning regarding the school district's policy on what is appropriate and inappropriate in terms of social media. When asked, you said that, if it's a personnel issue, you can't talk about it. And I understand that. As a former union executive, I knew that I had to toe that line. But, however, some of the behaviors are really bizarre. And usually when they hit the press, they create national attention. So I guess my question to you is, at what point does your policy allow, or do you believe that you should handle it by press release before it hits the papers?
Fantastic question. The policy is very specific about social media or use of social media, even if it's personal, because it could still represent the school system. And these postings clearly represented the school system. At the time, it was a great question. I oftentimes deliberate with my team, my administrative team at the central office, to talk about press releases. It wasn't determined to have it at that point in time. We certainly were receiving lots of emails. I think that was probably one of the questions and one of the concerns that I received the most of during the month of August and through the very beginning of school. But we did release something to the school system. We were made, as soon as we received, I think, our third email, we sent something to all parents that we know that we're receiving hits on social media. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but we did say that we are aware of this and we are addressing it. We sent it to all of our families, but we did not take the next step and send it to the newspapers or other social media. I'm not a Facebook person myself, just so you know. I dabble a little bit in Twitter, but we did not take the step to go to the next level of a press release for the local newspapers. It's a great question.
Thank you for that, and tell you that I sincerely hope that you won't have to face that question during the school year.
Thank you. I agree. I hope I don't either.
Just to follow up one thing on that, like I always tell the kids, never write when you can speak, never speak when you can nod, never nod when you can wink. I say that all the time here. That's a good example of that.
Right.
Your digital footprint follows you forever.
Thank you.
Sound like an attorney, Mr. Marcy. Mr. Johnson.
Oh, sorry.
Superintendent LaMarche, I'm not going to nitpick your every decision you had to make as a leader. I know it's difficult being a leader when times are tough. So, thank you for your best efforts. It's definitely apparent that you're doing a great job in a very difficult situation. I think we said the same thing about Town Administrator Ruda last week. One observation, I see a reduction in silos between the two towns working together after probably some tough times getting to that point. My question is, what other ways can we break down the silos and decision-making between the two towns that would help both the towns and the school community?
It's a great question because coming in, I've typically worked within a single town. So I really have that angle on it, what it is like to work in a single town. But bringing two towns together is not unlike bringing two large entities, whether you're talking about two school buildings at the same grade level together. So from the school perspective, we're really working hard to make sure that there is a symmetry between a fourth grade experience in Charlton and a fourth grade experience in Dudley. One of the things that I picked up on this year is that the staff has really not, over the years, has really not met together. So all grade 3 teachers have not met together as grade 3. So that's something we started instituting this past year. Now, I don't want to say that there's a positive from COVID-19, but COVID-19 caused us to actually come together and break that down for towns. In even the 9 days we had to start the school year, we were able to bring all of our grades together and bring our two, what we call sister schools, except for the middle school because you have Principal Packard and you have Principal Stacheski, the brother schools. We were able to bring them together and have some symmetry and really work on, a fifth grade experience should look like this, whether you're in this school or that school. As far as the two towns working together, I've not seen anything different because we've been meeting as two towns. We've been meeting with Town Administrator Ruder and Town Administrator Golas in the finance departments to really try to come together and really be kind of on the same page so that we have a better understanding of how we work together as a town, how the school fits within the two single towns. Because I really see us as, obviously, we are a huge player in your financial, economic budgets, but we're also a huge player in your culture too, and how we bring that culture together and really try to make it work. So I don't have an easy answer for you that this is the one thing that's going to do it, but we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep working together and pulling things together. Even the Board of Health, we've had meetings with the Board of Health members here, as well as the health director from Charlton. We've had group meetings on that. So we've really tried to pull things together so that the schools are seen as kind of a centerpiece for the two communities.
Thank you.
We're good? Well, thank you, Superintendent LaMarche. I was fortunate enough to meet you during the interview process before you were our superintendent, and my feelings haven't changed. I'm glad you're here, sir. Thank you very much.
Great. Invite me back at some point in time. I hope you at least received a sense that I'll be candid. I'll give you a response. I won't, I'll be politically correct. I obviously don't want to make social media mistakes, but I'm not a Facebook person.
Let's see how the school year goes and see if you want to come back.
Lose my number, right?
Yeah.
We're taking it one day at a time and working our tails off to try to make all this stuff work, so.
Great.
Okay?
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Yep.
Okay, next up on new business, we have Halloween trick or treat. Police Chief. Board will vote to take any action relative thereto. Good evening, Chief.
This might be the most watched. We're trending now because everybody wants to know this.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. This came up with discussion. I had talked to Chief Shaw over in Webster. And normally, as you know, our whole plan with Halloween and things, we usually try to coordinate between the two towns if things are going to happen, just because we kind of share a lot of the same population with people moving back and forth. So they are going ahead with theirs, and we will also, I would recommend that we go with Halloween itself on the 31st on a Saturday. Certainly there are a lot of guidelines that have come out through DPH, CDC, and everything else has put those out, so we will put those out as well for folks. Basically leaving it up as an individual option for parents or individuals if they wish to participate in any type of trick-or-treating or anything of that nature. Give everybody the information and let them make their own decisions on how they want to go about doing it. I think everybody's kind of adjusted to masks and social distancing and hand sanitation and everything else that goes with it. So there are certainly ways that everybody can be safe and go out and have a good time and at least get some enjoyment out of things as they move forward. So that'd be a recommendation for the board to recommend Halloween. It's certainly a new normal than anything else, because like anything else we're doing now is everything's different. But just give our people the opportunity to celebrate it in whatever way they see fit. And if there was any trick-or-treating, my recommendation would be between 5 and 7, 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. on that evening. So I can answer any other questions or go over it all if you wish.
Anyone have any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Sullivan?
can we ask Fire and EMS if he concurs? Because
We did have a discussion with our group that meets with the Board of Health and everything last week, so we kind of went over some of the things there, and that's why we emphasize also the guidelines that are going to come out. DPH was coming out with their own guidelines. CDC came out with some too, some different suggestions, different recommendations. So we would certainly put those out for everybody's consideration. But that group did sign off on it as well.
Mr. Chairman, I've drafted a press release after tonight's meeting. I was going to put it out tomorrow. And we're specifically using the term, instead of like we do every year and declare trick or treat 5 to 7 on Halloween, we're declaring Halloween instead, to celebrate Halloween, just to bring the distinction to that we don't expect that there's going to be a lot of people, and hopefully none, doing the traditional trick or treat without taking the certain precautions, you know, CDC recommendations and DPH guidelines. That's going to be part of the press release. So rather than to be the town that bans trick-or-treating, we're declaring Halloween, and we're going to let people make their own decisions within those guidelines.
Thank you, Mr. Ruda. Mr. Johnson?
All Hallows Eve wasn't bantered about. You went with Halloween.
Who, what?
he probably doesn't know what that means.
All Hallows Eve?
I know what it means. He probably doesn't.
Never mind.
Mr. Joseph, do you have anything on this?
No, sir.
Chairman will entertain a motion unless there's further discussion. Mr. Marcy?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we take the police and fire chief's recommendation, and the town administrator's carefully worded press release to allow Halloween to happen and allow people to use their best judgment if they'd like to participate.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Sullivan?
can we have this
Yeah, that's a good.
handout that we have
We will.
sent out on, I don't think I need it part of the motion, but make sure we get this out to social
On the web-
media savvy people,
It'll
On
include
the
links and
website, on Facebook, on,
Twitter.
Mr. Marcy?
I have another question that I was just thinking about, my own motion. What if, like, I hope it doesn't, but what if, caseload goes up? Do we have another point where we address it, or no? Or continue?
Well, I think you always have to keep anything in mind, because things can change. But again, I think we've kind of maintained things pretty consistently, over time, and we just hope that'll continue with everything as it goes. And again, I think if people, it's always at least the opportunity at this point for folks that if you do not wish to participate in it, same thing as normal. People would shut their lights off or whatever it is. I recommend also too, somebody just put a sign on their door or a sign out front that says, not participating due to COVID reasons or whatever, and that would eliminate any other contact of people going to homes or whatever it is. So basically leave it up to people that may use their best judgment and try to, again, limit your crowds and limit your parties. I think the biggest thing is if we went the other direction and said, no, we're not gonna do it, you might be encouraging more people to have their own individual private parties and things like that. So it might turn into be a bigger situation than we would want. So give everybody the chance to just kind of make it on their own and make their own decision.
100% agree, so I'll leave my motion the way it is.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
No.
It's hard to judge facial expressions with only a third of the face.
Just usually disappointed.
I'm used to it. Roll call vote.
John Marcy, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Kerry Sigenovich, aye, unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chief.
Thanks, chiefs, thanks to the working group too, Mr. Chairman, that have been handling all these decisions.
Yes, agreed. Up next, we have the special town meeting warrant. Mr. Administrator?
Mr. Chairman, this is the draft warrant that we're putting together, which we hope to close on, which we have to close on Friday. So we'll be posting a meeting, however short it may be, for the Board of Selectmen to vote to close the warrant on Friday. So over the course of the next week, we'll put this warrant from draft form into final form and take a vote on it to close and move forward with it and post it. It has to be posted for 14 days in advance of the town meeting. So Friday is a crucial date for us to vote on closing the warrant.
Okay.
So we can do it several different ways, Mr. Chairman. I can go over the individual draft articles and summarize. I can go over the individual draft articles and say nothing unless somebody wants me to say something.
Why don't we do
Or we
that?
can
You
take
could-
it in under advisement.
We could either take it under advisement, or Mr. Sullivan.
Why don't we do,
We'll put them aside.
similar to what we do before the town meeting?
That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking,
just-
say,
Don't summarize, just do the number. Article 1, any questions? Article
and you
2.
say,
The problem is
Can you
that we're
say-
not to the point where we've drafted article numbers yet, so.
Oh, I'm surprised.
No,
I
it
thought
turns
that-
into
I'm
an
surprised.
X.
I thought that
I
said
saw
Article,
Roman numeral.
I thought that said Article 1.
But,
oh, I did,
yeah, but it doesn't go much
The article
further.
X.
It doesn't go much further than 4, because we're still receiving
it's gonna give it
requests.
to you.
What we can do next, people can follow along.
Okay, why don't I summarize the first
Yeah, just go
sentence or
1,
two?
yes, no, go 1 yes or
Well,
no, 2
it
yes.
looks like the first four are pretty,
Those are boilerplate
I
ones.
think that, is the town clerk here?
Yes,
Michelle?
she's around the back. She's here. Yeah, why don't we just start,
Oh,
it
Larry's
says-
here.
where it says Appendix A, just say first one, second one,
Okay.
sure.
and anybody's got a question, just flag it or whatever.
Are you good with that, Mr. Joseph?
Was this, were these articles for the special town meeting warrant included in the, as an attachment in the email that
Send it to me now.
Jonathan sent out Friday, because I don't recall seeing that.
They probably didn't make it into that batch, Mr. Joseph, because they were,
Let me send it to him.
yeah, Michelle's gonna fire them over to you right now if you have your computer open.
Well, then, were they sent out, Mr. Chairman, in a separate email?
I'm not sure, Mr. Joseph. Let me,
Michelle's gonna check right now and see.
I'm going to look at mine quickly while Michelle is about to send.
And the answer is simple. If I have not seen them, then I will abstain from a vote on them.
There's no, and we're not gonna ask for a vote, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Joseph. We're just gonna talk about them. The vote will come on Friday, after everybody's had a chance to digest them.
Okay, so we will meet, what, October 2nd, go over them?
We'll meet for, this coming Friday and go over them and vote to close the warrant.
Okay, then I have no objection.
Okay.
I don't believe we'll be voting on any of these. We're just
No,
discussing.
we're discussing
correct?
them.
Good.
Only if there's a question.
Okay. I don't see it in my email.
Article 1 is town reports. Article 2 is hear and act upon the recommendation of the selectmen and the FAA at the town meeting. Article 3 is, it's going to be populated with transferred for unpaid bills from the prior fiscal year. Article 4 is the FY21 supplemental budget appropriation, which will be settled after this is posted and part of our joint FAA meeting on October 6th. Those numbers are still being worked out. The next article is the Water Sewer Commission is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate borrow transfer $343,349 for the purchase of the pickup truck that I mentioned earlier, with a source of funding coming from retained earnings. The next article is a follow-up to an article that was passed at the Springtown meeting that allowed us to dedicate, without two-thirds vote of the town meeting, automatically dedicate certain funds to be directly deposited upon receipt into the stabilization, one of our stabilization accounts, either capital or stabilization. That was authorized last year by the town meeting, but we didn't have specific monies that we wanted to deposit directly upon receipt. And my recommendation for this article, which I'm sponsoring, is to put 50% of the revenue derived from cannabis host agreement entered into by the town directly into stabilization, 100% of revenue derived from any ground lease agreement entered into by the town, which will be the Amoresco landfill project, the lease agreement, and 100% of revenue derived from municipalities' rides and revenues, which is a very small amount of money. That's revenues that we receive for people who use Uber and that kind of service in town. And those would be, upon receipt, directly deposited into stabilization. The next article is dam and stormwater inspection, engineering, and administration. That's our standard $25,000 request that was put on hold in the spring to address our stormwater and dam engineering issues in town. It's a perennial request. Next one is, the town clerk is here, but if she doesn't mind, I'll just speak to this, is to transfer $1,850 to pay for the bylaw codification project that we completed last year.
We did. It's just up to the action taken at the Springtown meeting. We're waiting for the AG's office to approve it before they can finish it.
So we had several pages of bylaw changes. They weren't bylaw changes, they were codifications, meaning that terms were changed from superintendent of highways to highway superintendent in every single bylaw we have, so everything was consistent and codified. So that would pay for this service. All of those changes passed at our last town meeting. We now have to pay for it. Special, the next one is the special legislation to allow me to pay for, to allow me to sign off for bills, drafts, invoices, orders, and payrolls on the authority of the Board of Selectmen. That failed at the last town meeting. But I did add one line to it, which I think may make it a little bit more palatable. Let's see. Hoping it made it into this draft. Okay, here it is. Approve all bills, drafts, invoices, orders, and payrolls under the authority of the Board of Selectmen for funds, this is the important part, for funds budgeted and previously approved by town meeting. Meaning that the town meeting said, already gave permission to spend on these line items. We just need a signature to process it, and it shouldn't require 3 to 5 signatures to do so. So we added that language into it, so it just kind of demonstrates that the town meeting voters have already approved it. And all we're doing at this point is processing it in a more efficient manner. Here's a good one. This one is sponsored by the Planning Board. Proposed zoning bylaw amendment for the Mill Conversion Overlay District, which is what we're taking up at the public hearing on Wednesday. The next article, depending on how this meeting turns out, the Planning Board's recommendation talks about 115 Schofield Ave. I believe the planner is here tonight. Is Bill here?
No.
But that's on our agenda separately, isn't it, Michelle?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so as long as he's here, we'll speak to that shortly. Okay. Next is here's a placeholder. The next article is a placeholder, which I'll have populated by Friday. And as soon as I get the correct wording, I'll send that to the board in advance. It's a placeholder for the solar project on the capped landfill. That's the Amoresco project, and in 2017, the town meeting approved for the selectmen to receive a lease payment for that. So that's all done. So now we're asking for authority to negotiate and enter into a pilot agreement.
We're not gonna do that now, though.
We could do it now and just get rid of it.
It's up to you.
Mr. Chairman,
It's up to you.
you want to take out of order, you want to continue with this, or take the next question on the agenda out of order and address that article?
There's only like 8 articles left. Let's just plow through this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Only
there's,
5 left.
yeah, that's it. Let's just get through it and then we'll do that.
It just looked scary, a lot of words for that one.
Okay.
That's what scares me, but it's not a public hearing. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was just saying, Mr. Massey said that there's a lot of wording in that other article. Gets kind of scary, and I said, it gets scary because nobody goes to the public hearing,
Well,
get their questions answered, and then they try to,
but I mean, he's
Fight it
here,
on.
he could like just give a quick synopsis of it.
right, but then they try to fight it out on town meeting floor. And
Communication. Tell them
participation.
tell people 5 to 7 times and then they
Mr. Ruda, what, do you want to finish all of the articles and go back to that? Is that what you want to do, or do you want to do the big one?
I think maybe we just, we're almost done with the articles.
Great, let's go.
Okay, the next one is,
Go.
the next one is $6,972 transfer. Source of funding for that will be free cash into the supplemental. That's for the town clerk's office. We brought the assistant town clerk back earlier than I anticipated because of the mail-in voting and everything that was thrust upon us from the state. So we've got to make that fund whole till the end of the year. The next one is the town clerk special legislation petition to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the general court, and that's to change the position of town clerk from an elected position to an appointed position. And I've asked her to, the town clerk is asking for the Board of Selectmen to support that article, and she's gonna speak to it.
So you asked for this to be put on, correct?
I'd like to actually do it jointly with the selectmen and have that put on the town meeting. There's a lot of towns that are now going to appointed town clerks, and I can see the benefit of both. Obviously, having it be appointed, my huge benefit would be I wouldn't have to run for election every 3 years. The upside for the town is that there would be more accountability. You'd have more coordination between the offices and allocation of resources. So I put it forward just for consideration.
Mr. Sullivan?
Mr. Chair, well, I say that I'm not generally opposed to this. This came up when our previous town administrator, and a point that was made at that time, I think by myself, and I think Mr. Joseph agreed, instead of, at that time, there was talk about the clerk. Instead of, I guess basically what happened then, I still feel the same way, instead of picking one position at a time, then another one, I think we should do a review, excuse me, of all elected positions. For example, like the planning board, the last 7 or 8 people that got elected were all write-ins. My opinion, that board should be appointed also. So as opposed to picking one, and maybe next year pick another one, and 2 years pick another board, I would prefer a review of all elected and appointed positions to determine whether we should put a whole packet forward to change the way we fill some of these slots.
Okay.
That's how I felt several years ago, and that's how I feel now, and I've made it clear. I made it clear to Greg. I made it, you know, when Mr. Ruda was on the board, we ended up, I think, generally as a board, we all agreed at that time. I believe the vote was to have the town administrator make a whole slate of recommendations, and I'm sure with people leaving and coming on, it just got.
So are you saying to put, Mr. Sullivan, to put all of those on this, or to hold off on the town clerk's request until we get all of them?
I would prefer to hold off on the request unless the majority of the board feels it's okay to go forward with one position now, or one position at a time. I'm generally in favor of making the position appointed. I want to be clear, but I'm not in favor of doing them one at a time. You know, we all know, we all have to run. Town clerk had to run. Like I said, I'm probably beating the planning board up, and I shouldn't, because other boards have had write-in as opposed to, and I'm not saying a person get write-in votes can't do a good job. I mean, I had a write-in campaign many years ago. I just would prefer to see everything as opposed to one at a time.
I get it, but, and I'll get to you in a second, Mr. Johnson. But I see the FAA, the Personnel Board, and I know I'm missing another one. Those are appointed, and we still can't get people on those. Mr. Johnson?
I see a huge difference between a, full-time salaried position and, some stipend guys that, get elected. I feel someone is talented, works hard, develops themselves, they get this job, that they shouldn't be at the whim of the public. The town hires basically a highly qualified person in that case, and I think sometimes we get lucky, and it's the same thing, right? But in the future, it might not be.
Well, the only thing to that, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
and I understand there's people out there saying it's a popularity contest. To be appointed, you only have to be popular with 3 selectmen. To be elected, you have to put your name out there and get a majority of voters.
Dean, please, Fire Chief, yes, sir, please do.
I think about 90% of the cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, maybe it's a little less than that, I'm not positive, I don't have the numbers in front of me. The clerk's position and the treasurer tax collector is appointed in most towns, and the reason for that is just for what Selectman Sullivan just said. You have two professional positions that requires professional people to do the job. I mean, you're talking about one position, you're talking about your town's chief financial officer, and you can potentially get somebody in there that has no idea what they're doing, and there's no accountability under the elected system. It's just archaic. I don't understand why it's so hard for people to understand that. They should be appointed, those two positions. It protects the town.
Thank you, Chief Kochanowski.
Well, and Mr. Chair, if I may,
Mr. Sullivan, certainly.
as I said in the beginning, I've said it a couple times, I'm generally not opposed to it. So would it, through the administrator, if I may, would it be a possibility to amend this article to address the three positions that the chief just was mentioning? Could we change this article to say clerk and treasurer collector? I would probably be more amenable to have vocal support of that, and then as we go to stipend volunteer positions.
But there's another one further down, I think.
Also, we don't. Oh, wait, sorry, I didn't see that because it wasn't numbered.
Yeah.
So we don't want to put them together, Mr. Administrator. You want to keep them separate?
I'd have to
It's
do two
absolutely
separate
up
acts.
up to the board. The town clerk approached this as something that she wanted jointly sponsored. For her, it depends on the tolerance level for the Board of Selectmen. If one passes and one fails, or they both pass and they both fail, it's a strategic decision at this point.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Joseph.
I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Ruda. JJ, what's our approximate annual budget?
Approximately $26 million.
$26 million. Okay. When the issue came up of making some positions elected versus appointed a few years back, I vehemently opposed it, as did Sully. I will just as vehemently support changing the town clerk and the treasurer collector, and if there's any others that fit the bill, changing them back to appointed positions. Now look, we are the 5 selectmen, we're the executive branch of this government. We are the directors of this corporation. We don't elect a fire chief. We don't elect a police chief. They are positions of enormous trust. The town clerk's position is not a minor position. That's one of the spindles around which the entire town government runs. And if you're running a $26 million corporation, you sure as shit want to have the person who's taking the money in and spending the money, also known as the treasurer collector. You sure as hell want that person answerable to somebody because of the enormous trust. That's not casting aspersions on our current treasurer collector. That's just damn sensible business practice. So I have zero problem with asking for more than one position to be changed from elected to appointed. Because right now, there are people who are elected, who have said they don't report to us. we're responsible for a $26 million corporation. We sure as hell better have everyone report to us. And then if we screw up, it's our fault. But we can appoint people who are qualified. We can have a job description that covers all of their duties. We can have an evaluation process to make sure they're doing the job the best of their ability. Right now, we're extremely vulnerable, and from a corporate point of view, in my mind, that's pretty stupid.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Anyone else? Comments? While we're,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Marcy.
Give us a well-rounded discussion on this. So, the last time this came up, I think we put it in front of the town meeting. Actually, we put it on the ballot. Did we put it on the ballot?
This
or-
was on it was on the ballot.
No, it was just a town meeting, and it failed, right? I think people always like to have a hand on the lever on stuff like this, but we need to make the case. Mr. Joseph actually just made it better than I ever could, so, Paul, on why those positions are strategic in nature and critical to the successful and proper operation of our business, of our corporation, as Paul said. You know, the taxpayers deserve that. So like everything else, communication will be key on what are the benefits are. Laurie, you mentioned a few. I just think we gotta explain to people why it makes sense on these positions. I agree with Mr. Johnson that, you know, like I said, employee type paid positions are much different than, you know, filling the planning board or the volunteer type things. So.
Mr. Sullivan.
So as I was listening to Mr. Joseph's comments and Mr. Marcy's comments, I think back to, and I'm sorry I'm putting him on the spot, I'm thinking back to when we appointed our current fire chief EMS director. And we had a mileage provision. He had to live within a certain miles of the town. And when we appointed him, he was slightly outside it. And as a board, we voted to waive that requirement. So this would obviously increase the pool of people because obviously we're going to take the residency requirement out, right? And we're going to have a mileage requirement. Are we going to appoint someone that may live 30 miles away?
Remains to be seen.
So questions like that, I think, need to be addressed also.
I think first we get a mandate from the town meeting voters saying which direction to go. When we get a direction, then we make those decisions, no? I don't think the town meeting voter is going to vote any differently whether we've got a 25 or a 27 mile radius or a residency requirement. I don't think they'd vote any different. Do you think we should have that set up before we go to town meeting?
I would certainly think it would be a concern. I mean, to be fair, the 62 people that are going to be there, no, but if push comes to shove, and right now we have a town clerk that's a resident. If we had another appointed position and the person lives X and they have difficulty, I know they can remote, and we've all proven it can be remote. But I think questions like that are going to come up, and
Some positions can be remote.
and again, as I said earlier, I'm generally in favor of going to appointment, but if there's questions, I will bring them up from the podium up. I may lose the vote, like I said, the 62 people that are gonna be there probably, I think puts the cart before the horse, to use the old saying. It's like you're posting a job and there's no qualifications, there's no requirements, I mean, anybody can Google what does a town, because Laurie's here, what does a town clerk do? And you'll get feedback through but I guess as I'm thinking about it, like I said, what Paul said kind of clicked. Okay, we're gonna appoint the town clerk. All right, I'll vote for it, yep. Okay, now we're gonna come back and say, well, when we do make a posting, we're gonna add mileage, educational requirements,
I don't think mileage applies in those positions.
Maybe not, but, you know,
We'd have to base it, Mr. Chairman.
I've lived
on best
65
practice.
miles away from my jobs, and I live there every day, so.
and again, it's no reflection on who is asking, who is in the positions. It's, I just think that those questions are what just kind of bouncing around, listening to everybody.
And I think we should get the house before we plan on how we're going to decorate it. That's just the way if I could use that as a,
What do you mean, to see what people wanna do, and if they pass it, then we set up the stuff Mr. Sullivan says, Mr. Chair?
that's what I think. I mean, if you folks think different, that's fine. It's not, I'm just thinking that's a lot of work to put in before we don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Because we're 5 votes, we're all town residents, Mr. Chair, and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we might wanna be for it, but other people might not be, so.
You're right. Maybe not all of us are for it. You never know.
Well, that's true.
Mr. Johnson?
It's,
We're just 5.
you know, that, I like that thought process where it's a good litmus test to see if the town has an appetite for it. Instead of doing a holistic, top-to-bottom review.
Let's get the house before we pick paint colors. Mr. Marson?
I'm not saying Mr. Sullivan's wrong at all.
No.
I mean, we're gonna need all that, right? Especially if we have to, again, the communication. Here's what happens as a result of this vote, right? This is what we're gonna need to do. So maybe that's part of Laurie. And I'll put, you know, as a petitioner, that would be something you would, you know, this was my job description, and this is all that other stuff. So
I'm
people
sorry, what
understand
was
what the
that?
town clerk does, right? Other than what, you know, dog licenses and
There's
voting.
there's an awful lot involved.
Yeah, of course there is, yeah,
Quite the learning curve, even with the background that I had
right,
in here.
yep.
Any others, Mr. Ruda? Any other further on this?
So
Are we ready?
is the board thinking that we do, I have provided several draft articles in here. Are we placing both on one? Is that the board's pleasure, or? And then I've got to speak to,
Again, I will generally be in favor of the second one, but I will have the same reservations that I have on the first one. And I've lost plenty of 4-to-1 votes in my day, and I've lost plenty of town meeting floor discussions. And if I lose this one, I'll be back next meeting.
But usually when you're the 1 to the 4, you're right, so.
Well,
But it's the same, Mr. Chairman, it's the same
Appreciate
thing,
that,
right?
but no.
What does the town meeting want? Right, and then we
well,
can,
we know what the town meeting wants, not reflective of this article, like I keep making a joke, the 62 people that are there, the 33 will want one, and the 29 will get beat.
Is this something we decide now, or do we vote on this on Friday?
we can vote on it on Friday. I also have a placeholder, Mr. Chairman, that Laurie and I discussed a placeholder for salary, a salary adjustment for,
it's in there,
I think
Is
that was
it
already
in
in
here?
there. Yeah.
it's in
That's
there,
in there.
the one right above it,
you want, okay.
salary restoration.
Mhm.
All right, just so I didn't confuse the issue here, because we had discussed replacing money into your budget for having to bring Jackie back before scheduled, correct? As well as this article, replacing money into your salary line item?
I thought the money was already there for Jackie. I'd
Okay.
have to double check that.
All right,
Because she went a time period without that being taken out of the budget.
okay, we'll just double check. then.
Okay, I will double check that one.
So going back to that article, Mr. Chairman, that's a salary adjustment being requested by the town clerk.
Mr. Sullivan?
Well, again, I feel bad, Laurie's here, I feel like I'm beating her up, but I'm really not. This goes back to a discussion we had a couple of years back. Again, I think Mr. Joseph and I were on the same side. An elected person, or someone appointed, full-time. We've had people come in, take a job and leave because they run for a position knowing what the salary is budgeted at. And the rationale in the past was, well, everybody else got, pick a number, 2%, 1.5. But the other people get, or should be getting, reviewed by their superior, by their department head, and not everyone gets them. I mean, when Greg was here, former town administrator, I thought he was very, very fair and decisive in a lot of his decisions. So I guess if somebody's appointed, Board of Selectmen says your position will be entitled to. If somebody's elected, you take the budget and say, I'm gonna run for, all right, I get that much if I win, all right. And as Laurie said, she's doing steep learning curve, she's doing a great job. I mean, between the COVID stuff, I mean, the last election we had was flawless, but I don't know, am I looking at things the wrong way? If I am, I apologize, but like I said, I've said it in the past, and I get a little bit of heat after from people in the town, and I feel bad, but you take a job, you know what the pay is.
Mr. Chairman, that having been said, I will say that according to the salary survey, that's, the current salary for the town clerk in Dudley is way out of whack. For surrounding, for the pay that, even the pay that the former town clerk left at, it's way out of whack.
How many years of experience did she have?
She had plenty, but I'm not talking about
Mr.
prorated for
Sullivan.
years, I'm talking about hired into the position out
I
of
got
whack.
you. Mr. Sullivan?
And I clearly agree with Mr. Ruda with that last statement. I mean, most of us were on the board leading up to the salary study that we commissioned. And I think it's fair, I'm not insulting anybody. We know that we don't pay top. You know, are we at the bottom? No, but are we probably in the lower half of some positions? I'm sure. We've tried to address them through the years, a little at a time. So I clearly understand that. But in your budget process, we set a figure. And we all get the salary study. If we want to go to 100% of whatever the average or whatever the rate is, we had different grades, I don't know if they were grades, categories, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I found some fault in some of the rankings where people were, their job was ranked. I thought they should have been in a higher group based on responsibility, but again, let's move on.
Yes, go ahead.
Could I speak on this article for a moment? And I understand what Selectman Sullivan's saying. However, when this position came up, when Aura was retiring, they cut it almost 9%. And almost 90% of the position is all regulatory. In this year that we had, it was an amazing year with the elections, with the COVID. There was so much work involved, and then to have it cut the 9%. I know you mentioned, Mr. Siganovich, Chairman Siganovich, you mentioned the experience. This isn't counting the longevity or even the extra stipend you get for having the certification, which you need to be a town clerk for 3 years. This is just bringing it back to the level it was in 2019. I mean, the workload has been tremendous. We went without a clerk for, an assistant for 2 months, basically. The workload, the responsibilities. I still, even though you're a new clerk coming in, you still have to run an election. You have to run it right. There's nothing that you can do wrong. You can't not certify a death. You can't make a mistake on a birth certificate or a marriage license. So regardless if you've been here 25 years or it's your first year, you still have to be as exact and attention to detail as someone that's been there 25 years. So I've been required to do exactly what Laura was doing. She did a fantastic job. She was a great town clerk. I feel I've been doing a very good job on this. I've definitely put in a lot of hours and, you know, tried to do my best at this.
Mr. Marcy?
All right, I'll speak up on this too. So, always a fan of making sure that, you know, market rate is considered. I think that, because that position's elected, years of experience is only relevant to the people who would vote for that person. They still, to Laurie's point, still have to do the same exact job. So I think looking back, we should have left it where it was, the salary-wise. Again, that's just me. It doesn't mean whoever takes the job, again, they know going in, I agree with that. But being what it is and the state of things, you know, market rate is, it's still under, then you want to have, especially if we look at making that appointed, you need to, it might be even more in the future, so I think we should have left that alone.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to remind the board that this is sponsored by the town clerk and decided by the town meeting voters. What we're going to ask on Friday is which articles the board recommends approving or passing over.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything?
Right, but Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
I thought this was the time to make our comments. I prefer to have all our comments out tonight, to be informed, to think about it, as opposed to the dialogue we've had with the
Yeah,
clerk
keep
being
going.
here
Go on.
Friday. So I just want to be clear on that. We could have easily skimmed through them all, and then we could have hashed them out on Friday, but I thought the intent tonight was to hash it, and then Friday we'll just,
Just to review draft warrants, I agree.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay. just want to be clear that.
Okay, it looks like we've got the, what else do we have left? We have the,
Have a salary issue.
well, first of all, are we done with this one?
I'm good
Done with this one?
about,
Mr. Joseph, you all set on this one?
Yep.
Excellent.
What's next? Which one?
S-
Treasurer collector?
Writing,
Okay.
from the
The
treasurer.
next one, Mr. Chairman, is a similar request from the treasurer collector to see if the town will raise, appropriate, and transfer this sum of $1,807 to his salary account effective January 1st to take any other action relative thereto. The same type of article, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Should we, is the treasurer on?
I believe so.
Mr. Carmignani, are you there?
Coming off of mute, hello?
Hello, yes, we've got an article here to see if the town will raise, appropriate, or transfer a sum to the treasurer collector salary account. Wanted to see if you wanted to speak to that.
It would be a cost of living, for the same 2% that the union would get, or 2.5, 2.75, whatever the contract or whatever the personnel director decided, the town hall people were going to do. The town clerk and my position require a separate article. So I'd ask for you to favorably look upon it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carmignani. Any questions, anything? No?
I'm not going to repeat everything.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Next up, Mr. Ruda, exit stage.
There you go. You say be right back.
Yeah,
So,
check his emails.
okay. Do we want to look at the,
Yep.
the town planner? Do we want to go to that?
I have a question on the last one, but I guess I
Yeah,
have
let's-
to wait
yeah,
for
we'll
Mr. Ruda.
Come back to the other one.
I just don't understand why there's a $44,000 shortfall unless we deliberately underfunded that line item before when the library's
Is
been
the
closed.
library open now?
For curbside pickup.
It's been closed. I don't understand why there's a $44,000 shortfall in operating
I think
expenses.
they brought some of their furloughed people back.
I think they brought all of them
Here
back.
comes
Well,
Dave.
He would have funded it fully at town meeting, though.
Oh, no.
Mr. Ruda,
Was the last
a
one
lot of
deliberately
questions on the
underfunded?
last
Yeah.
one. The library trustees are looking for $44,000. What's the Reader's Digest version, sir?
That's a placeholder, Mr. Chairman. That amount needs to be, the librarian and the town accountant will take a look at that amount. Utility bills last year fell short. As you know, we level funded or reduced so we didn't adjust for that utility bill last year. And we've got to make sure that the furlough employees that we brought back lines up with the funds needed to get us through the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair,
Mr. Sullivan.
if possible, maybe even before Friday, can I get a breakdown of what is actually like a utility cost out of that and what's a personnel cost?
I agree.
Because when that library opened up, don't they have solar?
I think it was telephone related. We'll take a look at it. This was literally
Yeah.
an 11th hour request, and that could just as well say $14. Until we've had a chance to take a look at the numbers, I would consider it a placeholder. There'll need to be an adjustment, but I'm not sure of the amount.
Mr. Clerk,
Question?
I just want to know what the
Mr.
breakdown-
Joseph.
Chairman, question?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm wondering what the hell you're talking about, because I'm looking at the agenda I got that was mailed out Friday, and there is no mention of anything for the library on that agenda. Is there a new agenda that's not been made public?
No, Mr. Joseph, this is the fall special 2021 town meeting warrant we're going through. That's the separate email that I believe was sent to you. Correct? Yes.
No, that wasn't, but okay.
It's the same warrant, Mr. Joseph,
It's in
we've
the
been
warrant.
talking
It's
about.
the last article.
It's the last article.
It's the last page, Paul.
Last article in the warrant, sir.
Yep. I saw that, attachment. I didn't see anything about a library, but okay.
So we'll have a better amount over the course of the next 3 days, and I will send, as these things become clear, we'll send them out for the board to look at in advance of Friday. That literally that's gonna probably require an adjustment. There's a lot of departments that are gonna require an adjustment.
Okay. Chair, can we go
Okay.
back? Can we go back to the one we skipped over while Mr.
Certainly.
Miller stepped away? Go ahead, Jay.
Were you asking me a question?
Yes, the long one.
Bottom of the page before. No, we feel we've covered both of the appointed positions?
Well, the question is, are we going, there's another article
We're
on
going
here
to do
for
that
the-
Friday. We're going to decide if we're going to
Combine
I
the
go.
thought we were-
separate item.
I thought we were
Single or
discussing all
separate?
that now, for
We're
Mr.
gonna-
Sullivan.
So the question, Mr. Chairman, is that there are two draft articles on here.
Yes.
One to sponsor special legislation to appoint a town clerk, and a separate article to appoint a treasurer collector as opposed to elect. There's two separate articles. The question is, do we combine, or do we leave them separated? And do you want to have discussion with the treasurer on the line about the,
I have no
Draft article.
opinion if we talk about it now or if we talk about it Friday. What's the board's pleasure?
I'd rather, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to talk about it now since we're going through the warrant for the first time.
Okay, let's go. Thoughts? Mr. Marcy?
I was gonna say, why don't we let the treasurer collector make the case like the town clerk did?
Mr. Carmignani, are you there?
I am.
Do you have a copy of this, the warrant?
I do not.
He does not. How can we discuss it with him if he doesn't have it in front of him?
it's a draft article as to whether or not that we would sponsor special legislation to make his position appointed versus elected. The final wording is not on any warrant, so we can certainly discuss it. while
So
he's
there's
on the
no
phone.
final, do you want, should I read what this is?
Sure.
What's printed here? Mr. Carmignani, I'm going to read what's in the warrant here since this is a draft warrant, this isn't final. It's a special legislation permission to, special legislation petition to see if the town will, I'm sorry?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, Sully's gonna text it to him.
Actually, Mr. Sullivan's about to text it to you, but for the benefit of everyone at home as well, and Mr. Joseph, I'll read it. It's a special legislation petition to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the General Court for for special legislation making the elected position of treasurer-collector an appointed position for a 3-year term, such appointment to be made by the Board of Selectmen with such special legislation to take effect 90 days after the general court's passage of same, provided, however, that the general court may make clerical or editorial changes of form only to said bill, unless the Board of Selectmen approves amendments thereto prior to enactment by the general court, and provided further that the Board of Selectmen is hereby authorized to approve amendments which shall be within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition, or take any other action relative thereto.
Yes, and I have the text. Thank you,
Excellent.
Mr. Sullivan.
You got it.
I think Mr. Sullivan hit upon it when he made his statement that some things were being done almost one at a time. I couldn't agree more with that statement. I don't believe my position is similar to the town clerk. So though there is some irony there that we both have an MBA from Nichols. So as far as education goes, you can't say that you didn't elect someone who is at least has a good piece of paper up on the wall. I certainly would support what Mr. Sullivan had hinted at. You had gone through and done a salary survey with some external professionals. You've done the same thing for the DPW. You would think something similar would follow for this. Previously, the town administrator had made his statement that his ability to find payroll and VAT check warrants hasn't passed. So maybe that's an indicator that maybe we've reached our limit when it comes to piecemealing things, and maybe a bigger picture should be taken of everything, and maybe a strategy developed from there. That's my thought. Again, having read it, just a few minutes ago, I had no idea this was on the selectmen's agenda this evening, and really not prepared to go into much depth with a few minutes notice.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Carmignani. Anything else on
Thank
this?
you.
We're good? Okay. We discussed the library trustees. Can we get to the planning board proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
Thanks, Laurie.
Thank you, Lori. Is this the one where, yes?
Yes,
there it
Mr.
is.
Chairman, this is the one where we had a perspective.
Good evening, Mr. Scanlon. How are you?
We had a zoning request at the previous meeting, Mr. Chairman, where a prospective buyer of a property was asking for a zoning change, and we had more questions than we had answers, and the Board of Selectmen asked me to invite the planner, and I appreciate him being here at this late hour to come in and tell us what you're being asked to vote on, what the implications may be, and answer any questions that you might have.
I want to echo what Mr. Ruda said. Thank you very much for being here this
Sure,
late
you're
hour,
welcome.
sir. Appreciate it. So, Mr. Sullivan,
Mr. Chair, appreciate Bill being here. I enjoy talking with Bill when I do talk to Bill. My question that night, in a nutshell, which I think kind of drove it, if we zone one piece of property, is it considered spot zoning? And even if it passes town meeting, will the Attorney General reject it upon review?
So, to answer that question, I prepared a map for you. I think you have it in your packet, which shows the context of this particular article. So for the folks at home, the intent of, it's a citizen's petition submitted by the owner of 115 Schofield Avenue, which is the Metalogic property on Schofield Ave, 115 Schofield. So adjacent to this property are Hanky Sass Wolf property. South of that is the Stevens Mill property. Across the street is Ramco. And to the east is the French River and the town of Webster. So you can see that this is in an industrial 43 district, and it is industrial in character. It's appropriately zoned that way. I've also outlined here the 2 mill overlay district properties, the Chase Mill on the north end of the district and the Stevens Mill on the southern end of the district are also in the mill conversion overlay district. The intent of the citizens petition is to zone 115 Schofield Avenue to industrial 130 in order to allow an adult use retail dispensary in that property, because such uses are allowed in industrial 130 but not industrial 43, and they are allowed in the mill overlay district. And as you know, the Chase Mill has already been before you, and you have granted a host community agreement for them to move forward.
Yeah.
So the hallmark of spot zoning is when you take one property and single it out for special treatment that benefits one particular owner. So on the one hand, you could make the case that it is spot zoning, but in looking at the literature, there are a number of instances where rezoning one property has not been considered spot zoning. And some of the tests are that it not be arbitrary and unreasonable. And in this case, it's already zoned industrial. We're just changing the designation. And the primary reason for that is that only industrial 130 allows marijuana uses, but all the other uses are quite similar. So I don't think it's arbitrary and unreasonable.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just gonna,
Sure.
because I think this is an important point, Bill, because we talked about this.
Mhm.
The distinction between the two industrials is just the size of the lot,
Yes.
essentially, correct?
Correct.
There's no other relative distinction between.
Right. Except for the
what
marijuana.
we're being asked to approve versus what it currently is, except for the size of the lot.
Right.
And does this meet the lot size to become?
Yes, it's over 4 acres, and 130 is about a 3-acre lot size. A second test is that it must be related to the public health, safety, and welfare of the community. And I think you could argue that the town on a number of occasions has supported marijuana uses. First it adopted the medical marijuana. Then in the general referendum in 2016, the town supported adult use. And then the town also adopted an adult use marijuana bylaw. So in those 3 instances, the town has expressed its support for those kinds of uses. So I think it's consistent with the general welfare, and that it also is consistent with the town's long-range goals. And I think you can argue that this would support economic development by supporting a renovation of this particular property, which is kind of run down at the moment. It would help to revitalize that particular part of town and result in more tax revenue to the community. So I think you can make an argument that it's consistent with the town's long-range goals. So in my opinion, it's not really clear-cut one way or the other. I think you can argue both sides. I would argue that it is not spot zoning, but others may feel strongly that it is. So I think what would happen is that it would go forward to town meeting, and we can let the voters decide whether they think this area is an appropriate location for industrial 130, and then the applicant could go forward with an adult use special permit application to the planning board. I think the Attorney General, as Mr. Sullivan asked, would allow it to be approved at the Attorney General level, but someone could appeal it, which then would go to court, and the court would examine all the facts and make a determination whether this was in fact spot zoning or not. So if no one appealed it, I think it would stand if it was approved by town meeting. So that's kind of a summary of the spot zoning question. I wish I had a more definitive answer, but I believe that it could survive a spot zoning challenge.
Board members, anyone? Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Bill, thank you for that. Again, as I, excuse me, I stated that first night, I do not have a problem with the change. I don't want to see another empty building, or underutilized building in town. As the applicant, or the property owner said that night, there was impetus several years back to change some zoning in that area to increase usage. Didn't pass. It's okay. You can live with losing, as I said. So I will take the planner's advice and opinion, and probably the wrong time to do it, but I would support the applicant's request to change that zoning. I always did anyway. I just wanted to make sure we're not going to get 23rd and a half hour. We get something back saying, oh, you guys should have known better.
I just seem to remember when we were doing the marijuana piece that I thought the idea was for having the zoning the way it was to encourage redevelopment of properties that had fallen by the side to,
Because that's the mill conversion overlay district. This is not.
yeah, this isn't.
And to be fair,
It's in between, it's the ham and the sandwich.
correct, because when we did I believe I was on the planning board, and we did the mill conversion district, we were told we had to pick 3 properties, and we picked over here and the 2 down there. Chase Mill, it was Ethan Allen at the time, and the 2 Stevens properties. There was no impetus from any applicant or property owner in that area. Hanky Sass and Wolf wasn't even there, 115 Schofield wasn't there. There was no impetus from any property owner to be included in that conversion district.
Now there is.
I just wonder how many marijuana businesses can Dudley support, and I know we wanted, and maybe I'm overreaching here, I know we wanted that Art Lock place to get redeveloped, and hopefully with the zoning, that would encourage someone to do it.
There's actually a plan for Art
I'm sorry?
Lock. That's actually planned to be the Tricentennial Park, isn't it?
Oh,
I haven't heard that one.
I haven't heard that either.
Yeah, I think the Odd Lock people kind of fell off the map after their presentation.
I mean, as usual, I mean, I support the voters the voters having a voice on it. Doesn't mean that I'll approve it, but I support people at home, voters. Whatever their voice says goes.
I would just point out that the marijuana bylaw allows 2 retail adult use stores. We have one that's already been approved, and I expect an application to come forward to the planning board shortly. So there is 1 license available,
So we've got one left,
So, you know,
and it's essentially first come, first serve, as I understand it. So if
and you could hit a
this is
baseball
approved and
from
this
one to
applicant
the
comes
other.
forward, you would act on it in due course.
I just said you could hit a baseball from one to the other. Close.
Yeah, but you know, Mr. Chair, again, it comes down to our zoning. I mean,
Right, cannabis is only allowed in
Right.
this area.
where
That's-
else will we
So
put it?
there's no other place in town where we could
I mean, we got hammered on the,
realistically put it.
right, we got hammered at the town meeting on the solar farms. I mean, we, elected officials tried to put forward a comprehensive use of some property, and then this is the only place you can put them. Can't put them in Biz 15, we can't put them in Res 30, can't put them in,
And are
Put
we,
them there and on the dump, on the.
Dump's already spoken.
yeah, that's
and
a
already
separate
spoken, and
zone.
that's already spoken.
That's a separate zone, that's a, it's got the technical term, refuse area, whatever they call it. We really have nowhere else to put it. Maybe in West Dudley, and then one of those industrial zones, I guess, it would be possible, but.
Yeah.
Again, if somebody could put it, they'd be coming forward asking.
Okay.
My opinion.
The planning board is having a public hearing on Wednesday night. So we'll have a recommendation from the planning board before town meeting. They have not heard this application yet, so I don't know what the board's position is yet.
Okay,
Will they?
Yeah. So you'll, Bill, Mr. Chair,
yes.
so we'll have the recommendation by Friday, before town meeting, before we have to up or down this vote, right? Because they're gonna vote at the conclusion, well, they,
I can't say for sure,
yeah, they
but
don't have to,
most-
right, correct, they
most
don't have
likely,
to, right, right.
right.
Strange things have happened.
No. So in theory, we could have a
In theory.
determination. I'm good.
Anything else on this?
I'm good, I appreciate the,
So we're Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Bill, we're specifically, the board's being asked to do what right now? To vote to recommend to refer it to the planning board?
I guess it's just, at town meeting, the selectmen usually make a recommendation on zoning articles. So I'm just here to give you information, help you make that decision. It's
Okay.
independent of what the planning board will do.
Okay.
Before we do that, Mr. Joseph, do you have anything on this you'd like to add?
No, I will have it, but I think you're pretty good.
perfect.
Sorry, Paul, you were breaking up.
The reserve is
I'll have some questions down the road, but right now, they are premature.
Agreed, thank you. So do we need to vote on this now, or do we vote on this Friday?
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if the board so desires to, someone desires to second it, I personally would make a motion that pending planning board approval, the Board of Selectmen look favorably upon this request
On which item?
to rezone it to 130.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Did you hear that, Mr. Joseph?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Marcy, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Carrie Sigenovich, nay. 4-1. So that's it for this?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr.
There was another
Scanlon.
item on the agenda on complete streets. Did you want to
There is.
stick around for that, or no?
Is the board okay to take that out of order so Mr. Scanlon can get home? Looks like we have a vote to approve the Complete Streets policy. Planning board approved this on September 23rd, 2020.
Mr. Chair, make a motion to approve as presented the, what's the technical word, Jonathan, you want?
Complete Streets policy.
Complete street policy draft.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any questions, anything? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Carrie Sigenovich, aye, unanimous.
Feels like a big good luck charm tonight.
It's like Lucky the Leprechaun.
Good. Glad I could help. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bill.
Bill.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys.
All right, next on the agenda, we have Constable, vote to appoint Jonathan Ruda Constable consistent with June 2020 Town Meeting Bylaw Amendment with a term to expire June 30th, 2023, or take any other action relative thereto.
Mr. Chair, make a motion to appoint Jonathan Ruda, Constable, consistent with the June 2020 Town Meeting Bylaw Amendment with a term to expire June 30th, 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing, Mr. Joseph.
The constables are paid to deliver paperwork, is that correct?
I believe that's one of their duties.
Correct.
Yes.
That's what makes them money, is that correct?
I'm sorry? You were breaking up. I apologize.
They do get paid for delivering certain paperwork, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
All right, so my question to Mr. Ruda is, are you planning on getting paid when you deliver papers? Or are you going to do this pro bono.
Through the chair, Mr. Joseph, I will be paid my normal town administrator's salary and will do so only if no other constables are available to get the stipend. I will not accept a
So the
stipend
answer to
separately.
that- The answer to my question is that you will do this pro bono.
No, I will do it for my town administrator's salary, but not the stipend. So you'll be getting it for the same price that you're paying me anyway.
In that case, I object. I object to the consideration and the motion. We have a town administrator making over $112,000 a year. By his own admission, he would be a constable because it would be convenient in some cases on timelines, etc. And he wants to be paid on top of that. I'll tell you what. I
Who's
would
gonna clarify
rather
that one?
go against this any day of the week, unless he does it pro bono. And
Mr.
if he won't do it pro bono, then I would ask that we appoint Michelle Jervis to do it as constable to receive the money that a normal constable would get.
Well, is she gonna have to not get paid during the day?
So would Michelle get paid then? I'm, after you answer that, I'm gonna clarify, because I think you heard this incorrectly, Mr. Joseph.
And just for the record, Michelle, Paul, just for the
I
record,
don't think so, but
She's a
would
chapter
Michelle
resident.
get paid? My proposal is yes.
Okay, well, Mr. Ruda had said that he is not getting any additional, he is not seeking any additional payment above and beyond his regular payment as the town administrator, meaning he is not accepting any sort of constable stipend for doing this. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. I just think you might have misheard it.
No, I didn't misunderstand. I asked the question twice. I'll add it a third time. It couldn't be any clearer. I asked Mr. Ruda if he will do the constable's work pro bono. The answer is either a flippin' yes or it's a no.
Would you like to answer, Mr. Ruda, or do we?
Well, I will answer yes,
Paul, I think,
but I don't expect.
Maybe I didn't explain it right.
yeah, can I
Go
just?
ahead, Mr. Sullivan.
I think what Mr. Ruder is saying, and I'm gonna make up an example where it may or may not happen. We need a constable to post the town meeting warrant. Nobody's available. Jonathan is a constable. If he posts the town meeting warrant at 2:00 in the afternoon, he's being paid as town administrator. What Jonathan said is he will not accept the stipend
On top of it.
on top of it. He wants to make sure that the language is clear. When you said pro bono, if he has to break off from his duties to hang the warrant, it's only gonna take 10 minutes, you understand that? I think Jonathan's saying he's gonna do it, but he wants to get paid. He's not gonna get paid extra.
There's nothing complicated about my question. I asked him if he would do it pro bono, meaning not get paid. All I needed to hear was the yes. That's 3 letters, Y-E-S. I asked it twice, I didn't hear yes.
Mr. Chair, move the
If that's
question,
case,
move the
then I'll
vote,
for it.
move the vote,
Move the question.
Mr. Joseph,
move the vote.
We have a
I wanna
motion
make
and a
sure that he's-
second. Roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Kerry Sigenovich, aye. Unanimous. Next up, we have resignations. Health Agent Tom Purcell, effective 10/1/2020.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
make a motion to accept with regret Tom Purcell resignation. Tom's been our health agent for several years now. He's worked in other towns. Tom had done a great job on behalf of the advocate for the town of Dudley with this COVID and everything, so we accept with regret and ask that part of my motion be you sign a letter on behalf of the board, accepting it and thanking him for his service.
Certainly will.
Thank you, Tom.
Is there a second? Mr. Johnson is holding up two fingers. I will assume that's a second.
Oh.
Or do you want it to speak?
I wanted to speak.
Oh, okay.
Second.
Second.
One finger
One finger.
would be, you wanted to speak, two
Your
would be a
choice.
second.
Yeah.
We need to evolve here with the masks with a little sign language, but go on, Mr. Johnson.
So I spent a term on the Board of Health, and you know, a lot of tough discussions go on in regards to the Board of Health, and I know even more so in the current age. And you know, I respect Tom's opinion on many things, and including when we disagreed, and I think it was the discussion was better for it. But you know, he wouldn't want this minutia to go on any longer. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Aye.
Gary Siganovich, aye. Unanimous. Next up, we have licenses, permits, Nichols College, Saturday, October 3rd, 2020, from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., located at the Copper Beach Quad, Chamois Green, for DJ, music, and dancing.
Mr. Chair, make a motion, we grant the request from Nichols College.
Oh, it looks like we have a representative from Nichols College coming forward.
If you want to talk about it, you can, otherwise we're going to give it to you.
I say we vote.
Make a motion, we grant the request, Saturday, October 3rd, 2020, from 11 to 5, Copper Beach Quad, Chamois Green.
Motion and a second. You're okay with this, Chief?
Yes.
Any other further questions of the board? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Gary Siganovich, aye, unanimous.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Didn't Lynn Luby tell you how easy it is to come here?
You've been here before.
Make sure you let her know we didn't ask you any questions. Kidding. Public hearings, National Grid pole position, National Grid to install, there he is. How are we doing this evening, sir?
Good. Steve Susi from National Grid.
It's our buddy.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would read the public hearing notice and read into the record that you're opening the public hearing at 8:45, so that we can close it at 8:50.
I'm just getting to that. I don't. There we are. Hey, it is 8:45. It's 8:45. We're going to open the public hearing. Mr. Ruda, would you like me to read this, the notice to abutters? This is all that I have.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In accordance with the provisions of Section 22, Chapter 166 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that a public hearing will be held at the Dudley Municipal Complex, 71 West Main Street, Dudley, Mass., on Monday, September 28th, 2020, at 6:35 p.m., although it is 8:45 p.m., in the Veterans Memorial Hall, Room 321A. The purpose of this hearing, to act on a petition from Massachusetts Electric Company, DBA National Grid, to install one SO pole on Lakeview Ave, install new stub 10-84 with anchor for pole-to-pole guy. The existing tree guy from P10 needs to be removed. Anyone wishing to be heard on this matter should appear at the date and time specified or submit their concerns in writing. Kerry Siganovich, Chairman, Dudley Board of Selectmen. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. As I put in, the homeowner, I guess at 19 Lakeside Drive, decades ago, they used to put in tree guys to support poles. We don't do that anymore because trees get old, people want them, cut them down, so now we have to replace them with poles and with an anchoring guy. So we're removing the tree guy, the customer wants to cut it down, and so we're putting in an anchor, a pole with anchor and guy on Lakeview Ave to support the secondary wires that, go down southeast. of Lakeview Ave from the intersection of Lakeside Drive and Lakeview Ave.
Okay. Mr. Sullivan?
So just to be clear, I'm looking at the map you gave us. It's the darker of the two circles in front of 124, that's going to be where the new pole is?
Yes, where it says pole 10-84, the circle, that is where the new pole is going to be.
All right, I don't have-
Approximately around 80 feet from pole 10.
all right, I don't have that on my, I
No.
don't have that on this. That's okay.
What I've got is, I've got a dark circle and I've got a light circle.
Oh, wait, there's another map, hang on.
All right, yeah.
Not the same.
Well, it doesn't say here, though.
Yeah.
It says it on this one.
It would be the circle that's adjacent to 19 Lakeside Drive.
Oh, that's, okay. Oh, that's,
Yeah, I've just got lot numbers, I don't have.
It's right in front of that 9835.
we just have the dots, we don't have the.
Oh, it's,
So, Mr.
Okay, so I see one says P10 and one says P10-85.
84, yes.
84, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
I was doing a little arithmetic there, don't mind me. Okay, so this is 19. Sorry, I'm just copying.
So, Mr. Chair, one more question for the applicant.
Certainly, Mr. Sullivan.
Our administrative assistant, and we've done it before, so I feel comfortable doing it now. How do we stand on double polls and complaints with National Grid?
At this point, it's been a while, but we don't have that many double poles in town owned by National Grid. If there are any, they are Verizon poles.
Yeah, 2 years ago, it changed it. Before, there was, like, there are certain towns that was poll, in every town, someone, either us or Verizon, were pole custodians. So Verizon would set all the poles and remove them to National Grid. 2 years ago, that all changed. We install all the poles. That makes, like, outage restoration much more quicker. We don't have to wait for any. We can just put a pole down. And Verizon is supposed to remove all their old poles. The only time that we would be responsible would be almost, and this would be rare, would be something where we installed the new pole but didn't transfer any of the electric lines to it. Other than that, if it's the electric lines that transferred and the pole is cut off, the pole top, and there's communication, phone, and cable wires on it, that would be Verizon's issue to remove it.
So, the nickel answer to the dollar, they're square with us.
It's what?
They're square with us, National Grid.
They are, pretty much.
Because, okay, I'm good.
Good?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good? Good. Mr. Joseph, are you good? Anything to add on this matter?
Oh, okay on this.
Okay. What's the board's pleasure?
Well, I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, if there's, I think, Mr.
Close the public hearing.
That was a fly,
Oh,
not signaling.
I thought there was another.
Should I close, or do you
You
want to?
close and then we'll vote before, after.
Okay, we're going to close the public hearing at 8, wow, there's tremendous glare, 8:51 PM.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Sullivan,
make a motion that we grant National Grid's request to install one SO pole on Lakeview Ave, install new sub 1084 with anchor for pole, the pole guy.
Second?
motion and a second, any
I
further
thought he did,
discussion?
but he looked at me. Mr. Johnson seconded.
I, you do that? I'm kidding, I didn't hear you. All right, you seconded
He
it.
did it, yeah. I was like,
Motion and a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Joe Marcy, aye?
Paul Joseph, aye.
Harry Sigenovich, aye, unanimous. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for waiting.
And old business we already took care of. So now we are at board members' comments. Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Not much new, just, again, Nichols is back in session. Haven't had any public, record or comment of any kind of spikes up there. It looks like they're taking it pretty serious. Superintendent, kids are going back to school, everyone just needs to remain vigilant, safe, check on your neighbors, check on the elderly, and everybody just be safe. Happy All Hallows Eve, if I don't see you before then.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Joseph?
I want to ask the board to authorize the town administrator and our executive secretary to send a card of sympathy to the family of David Capagni, who used to be our superintendent, director of the Baypass Regional. His dad passed away late last week, and is being waked and then buried via Mercadante Funeral Home. And I think it would be nice if we sent sympathy cards to the family.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Mr. Joseph, thank you. Anything else?
Good.
Okay. Mr. Johnson?
Just a little correction. All Hallows Eve was the night before Halloween, which would be All Saints Day.
Right, because it's All Saints Day the next day.
November 1st.
Let me get that
Correct.
correct.
November 1st is All Saints Day. Holy day of
Oh,
obligation. Holy day of obligation for those of us that do.
I feel obligation to keep moving.
I'm feeling it. You're good?
Sad part is you had to Google that, and I got it up here.
Nothing new tonight, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Wisconsin Catholic.
I just want to touch on one thing. I've noticed, looking at the Facebook, that number of Dudley residents have had campaign signs from both presidential candidates go missing, destroyed, whatever. I'd ask you all to just leave them alone regardless of who you're voting for. Part of what this whole system of government is, it's the freedom to vote. And just, I'm sure there's some kind of law against ruining a campaign sign, and I don't want to see anybody get in trouble. Just leave them all be kind, and if you need to make your voice heard, please do, vote in November. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Sullivan?
echo, piggyback what you just said, especially Dudley Oxford Road, there was campaign signs up for people that were running in primaries. Please respect our veterans. Your signs are not wanted, welcome, tolerated, or allowed on any town property, but especially where the veterans memorials are. And historically, the highway department will take them, or the police department, and they usually bring them to the highway department, but please respect. Your signs are not, like I said, welcome, tolerated, wanted, or allowed, especially on the veterans memorials.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Yeah, it just bothered me one morning getting up. I've got neighbors across the road. They're wonderful people, and their sign was about half a football field away down the road, crumpled up, and there's no need for that. There just really isn't.
Unless it's Marcy signs when he's running against me.
Well, I think we've all been guilty of that. Departmental communication. George, do you have anything?
I forgot about your shoulders.
Thank you, George. Fire chief, do you have anything? Thank you. Police chief, do you have anything? Yeah, we already got you for Halloween. Mr. Carmignani, do you have anything?
Yes, I do. Quickly, until they get a little long-winded. The town of Dudley has a new EAP provider, the Employee Assistance Program. So as of October 1st, all of the employees are going to see a new flyer. Word has it that the Medic 2 renewal is going to be favorable. Everybody knows the Medicare supplement plan that the town of Dudley offers has a January 1st renewal. My spies tell me that it's going to be level coming up, but it won't be official until October 7th. For everybody who's on the health insurance, there are still a lot of remote access programs. They have some odd topics like anxiety, depression, what have you, mindfulness. There is a wellness program that they're working on. So in addition to you going and exercising, you're getting $150 or whatever the value is because you joined the gym. There's alternate plans for that, so all of the subscribers can take a look
And one final thing, on the horizon is going to be some loss control. Two separate entities have reached out, sort of in anticipation of next year's renewal. And that's more to come on that. Thank you for dialing me in. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Carignani, good to have you. Next up, we have the adjournment. Mr. Sullivan, would you care to read us into that?
Sure. Give me 1 second. Mr. Chair, make a motion that we convene into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21, subsection A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body as declared by the chair, not to reconvene in open session.
Second.
Motion and second, roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
All goes to 5.
John Marcy, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Kerry Siganovich, aye, unanimous. Good night, everyone.
Thank you,
Be
everybody.
kind,
Good
be
night.
safe.